welcome this morning to Banned Books Week Seminar 2021. We're excited to have this seminar today. We have several people presenting various topics, all about the issue of banned books. We mourn this week and we also celebrate. We mourn the fact that the information has been banned, censored, especially with books or other related materials. But we also celebrate how we can promote access. And that is my topic this morning, my presentation called Advocates for Access, Celebrating a Legacy of the Freedom to Read. And admittedly, I gave myself the easy job this morning. I get to start off on a positive note, and that's kind of my presentation. We will hear from several presenters, very cool topics about some concerning things, but I wanted to focus on the positive this morning and kind of ease our way into the seminar here. So our Dean of Libraries, Dr. Catherine Quill, when she summarizes what a library is today, and I'm a librarian, so I'm going to approach this topic kind of from a librarian's perspective, so that's why I'm talking about libraries right now. When she kind of talks about what a library is today, because people have that question, in the digital age, aren't you just a warehouse of books? What is a library even all about? She says that a library essentially is access. And I think she's right on. A library is about access, connecting people with information, researchers with resources. Whatever we can do to connect people with information is what we do. And that goes beyond, the physical book. It goes into the digital age or whatever technologies and tools we're using, but that's basically what we're trying to do. And so I want to celebrate a legacy of the freedom to read, of basically connecting people with information here this morning. I'll start out by highlighting a couple statements from the American Library Association's Freedom to Read statement. One thing they say is that we believe that free communication is essential to the preservation of a free society and a creative culture. Some big ideas there. Free society, creative culture, and free communication is essential to that. They go on to state that we believe that publishers and librarians have a profound responsibility to give validity to that freedom to read by making it possible for the readers to choose freely from a variety of offerings. A lot of words like free and freedom there. And the American Library Association sees its responsibility to promote that freedom to read by making it possible for readers to choose freely from a variety of offerings. I want to first look in history to a very important place, the Great Library of Alexandria. There's a lot of mystery and legend surrounding the Great Library. When was it made? Who made it? What happened there? When was it destroyed? A lot of historians place its creation to about the mid-3rd century BCE under it had a very Greek flavor to it, under the Ptolemaic reign. Ptolemy II Philadelphus is often pointed to as kind of the creator, so to speak, of the Great Library. And his goal was a lofty one. He hoped to collect all the books of the world. An impossible task, to be sure, but a valiant goal. And that was his idea behind the Great Library. It certainly wasn't history's first or only library, but it was pretty great. I don't know, I think our library is pretty great. Ours has a Starbucks, this one did not. So I don't know just how great that could be, because I don't see a barista anywhere there. But the Great Library of Alexandria, an important place in history. And that's where a lot of people could go to access information. And granted, it was probably just those interested in scholarship that would go there, but a lot of really cool things happened at the Library of Alexandria. One of them is this concept of like a dead library, which doesn't sound so great to us, but in the ancient world there, oftentimes they thought that a person's writings was them living on, basically. a dead person could live on through their writings. And what was kept of them, of their writings, did a lot more for them than any sepulcher or monument ever could. Another concept of the Greek flavor of library back in that day is what is sometimes known as the living library. Scholars would memorize entire texts, and at a place like the Great Library, they would even memorize where you could find them. And they would recite these texts, and they would recite even where they could be found on the shelves. And written above some of those shelves, legend has it that was inscribed, "The place of the cure of the soul." I really like that. The cure of the soul. That was the place to find the cure of the soul, information to read these texts. Kind of a third element that some people identify with the Great Library, some scholars call it something like the memory library. In the ancient world, when you would read, it would be typical to read out loud or to murmur the things as you're reading. It's only a recent concept in history that we read to ourselves or we read quietly or in our head. Back in the ancient world, they would read aloud. And so you would have people at the Great Library that would read or even sing some of these texts out loud, and you could hear that reverberate through the halls of these scholars reading or singing the text. Would you like some of our librarians today to be singing these books to you at Tarleton? I don't think so. Not me, at least. I would drive you out of the building. But it might have been a beautiful cacophony back in the day there to be reading or singing these texts. But what a great place for people to find information there. And that was the idea, the spirit behind the Great Library. I'm a big fan of archaeology, so I included some pictures of what's left of the Great Library. So next time you're walking around a library today, or ours, or any, and you might be thinking, oh, this is a little drab or outdated. Well, perspective, look at that. That's what's left of the Great Library. But what an important step in history to take, this Great Library. And so if I'm thinking of library terms, let's call the concept of the Great Library in terms of providing access to information. Let's call it curation or collection. They were curating or collecting information for researchers. Another, of course, important time in history, you may be familiar with this picture here or something like it. Yes, this is Gutenberg's printing press. Johannes Gutenberg, back about 1440 is typically when they place this in history, is he invents the printing press. The concept of movable type was already around in the Far East, for centuries at this time. But Gutenberg brings that concept to the West. He invents this printing press, and information can explode everywhere. And that was huge. Movements like the Renaissance or the Protestant Reformation were possible because of something like the printing press, where they could just crank out tons of resources quickly, relatively quickly. They could make copies of big works. They could do several hundred in a few years, which to us doesn't sound like a lot, but that was, like a news flash back in the day. And so Gutenberg invents the printing press, and yeah, he probably had a big profit motive to it. He had tried some businesses earlier on that maybe didn't work very well, and sure, he was trying to make money like everyone else. So maybe not every motive behind these movements of providing access to information are, the most pure or the most selfless. But as a result of this invention, you can have information spread far and wide very quickly. Ada Palmer, professor of early modern European history from the University of Chicago, said this about the printing press. I love this quote. She said, whenever a new information technology comes along, and this includes the printing press, among the very first groups to be loud in it are the people who were silenced in the earlier system, which means radical voices. People whose voices were stymied in the past or who didn't even have a voice. Printing press comes along, and these radical voices, so to speak, are the ones who can really get their ideas out there. The printing press enabled ideas to spread far and wide and quickly. Ada Palmer also goes on to say, after the printing press, it became nearly impossible to destroy all copies of a dangerous idea. So the printing press really enabled this spread of information far and wide. So in some ways, Gutenberg, I mean, this was like ancient Twitter. This was like the Twitter of his day. And in fact, lest he delete it so that nobody can find it later, I did do a screen grab of the very first tweet that was ever sent out. Gutenberg was ahead of his time. He's even verified there. That's pretty cool. The third time in history that I want to mention here is a man named William Tyndale. In 1526, what he does is he produces an English copy of the Bible. And this at the time was earth-shattering. The copies of the Bible were in Latin, and everybody in Tyndale's world wanted to know what was written in the Bible, but they had to hear it through the clergy, the priesthood, or they had to know Latin. So oftentimes the Bible was really only accessible by the learned, clergy, nobility, royalty, and the common person couldn't really access it for themselves. And so Tyndale publishes an English copy, even though they were supposed to be Latin. He publishes the full, complete New Testament in English. And, eventually he paid for it with his life. 10 years later, he was executed, among other reasons, this chiefly, for producing an English copy of the Bible. He was strangled and hung. There, it was wicked. So he paid for it with his life. But his goal, he answered his accusers one day. He said, basically, and I summarize, my goal is that the plowboy would know more than you. And that came true in many ways. And 4 years after his death, King Henry VIII actually commissioned English copies of the New Testament. So, his dream was realized. So if the Great Library at Alexandria, we'll call it curation or collection, the printing press, let's call that circulation, getting works out to everybody. William Tyndale's English copy of the Bible, let's call that communication or clarification. These different concepts that libraries even today are all about, these movements throughout history have done. And we can celebrate these things of connecting people with information. Some more modern things, or at least since Tyndale's day, we could have a long list, but I just want to point out a couple things. In 1766, we see the world's first access to information law in Sweden. To ensure the freedom of the press, including materials about the government, the Swedish law states, and this is the government stating this, free access should be allowed to all archives for the purpose of copying such documents in loco, on location, or obtaining certified copies of them. This is a law that the government codified, so that the press mainly, but so people could have free access to all even government archives. In 1946, the UN General Assembly Resolution 59-1, as an integral part of the fundamental right of freedom of expression, the UN resolution outlines the value to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. So, of course, the idea to impart information and to spread ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Great values there from Sweden and the UN. I want to finish by highlighting kind of more of a concept or a movement even today. I have a snapshot here of the OER Commons website. And this is something that Tarleton State University is advocating for, OER, or open educational resources that are free and accessible to people. And there are websites like OER Commons that collect these and disseminate them. They're free and accessible. And Tarleton, encourages its professors to find, good quality, free, accessible resources to assign in their coursework so students can access them easily. And, our library tries to make available a lot of those things and promote them. And so that's a concept even today. It's a value that is gaining steam for open access to information. And the number of items that are considered OER are increasing, both in terms of quantity and even quality. So you can reach out to us and ask more about that if you're interested in how you can help us promote OER resources and get them into the hands of our students. So here are the resources that I have consulted or quoted in this presentation. If you have any questions or would like to do some further research of your own, just reach out to me and I can help connect these resources to you. And thank you so much for this opportunity to celebrate a legacy of the freedom to read as we start this year's Banned Books Week seminar.